Hello. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about what animal behavior journals can do to enhance research reproducibility. And the starting point is that actually journals do have the power to begin shifting the culture towards research reproducibility because they shape the incentives and reward structure that drives the researcher's behavior. The overall goal of changing editorial practices to increase reproducibility is to reduce the publication bias, which is a practice that consists of mostly reporting selectively positive results or significant results over non-significant results, which over time could lead to some constraints in our ability to answer broad scientific questions by using the results from multiple studies in, for instance, a meta-analysis. So here is a list of some editorial practices that multiple other authors have proposed in the past that actually can reduce publication bias and enhance research reproducibility in animal behavior. So the first one has to do with the submission process. So we usually submit a manuscript, and it could be a really good practice to submit not only the data but also the code, irrespective of the platform, for peer review. So the idea here is that there might be some simple statistical analysis that reviewers can take a look very quickly, but there might be other more complex statistics that reviewers might not be able to understand fully. And maybe journals could think of the implementation of a code editor to deal with those complex analyses. And you can think of, for instance, mixed models as one of the examples. So what that can do is it can make sure that the statistical analyses align with the experimental design. Eventually, that manuscript will be accepted for publication, and publishing the manuscript along with the data and the code for both the stats and the figures can also be a good sign for increasing the reproducibility of that research study. Another important thing is that we should start thinking about shifting the emphasis of only talking about significant results based on p-values, and also start having conversations about the magnitude of those results. In other words, we should try to report more often the effect sizes. Training editors, reviewers, and authors on biases, multiple, is a very important idea. One of those biases has to do with HARKing, which is coming up with a hypothesis after the results are known. And there is evidence in the literature that HARKing leads to selective reporting and ultimately to publication bias. Now, the problem of HARKing, particularly when it comes to animal behavior, is that in some cases, editors might encourage the authors that do not have a priori hypothesis in their introduction to include one as part of the review process. And that can certainly lead to publication bias because that practice, that editorial practice, could favor confirmatory over exploratory research. And confirmatory research is research that has an a priori hypothesis versus exploratory research, which is also known as descriptive research. I would encourage people to read this wonderful paper that was published in 1998. One of the reasons is because it deals mostly with animal behavior research. But the most important research is because this study makes the case that both confirmatory and exploratory research are necessary. And both can talk about hypotheses, but in different parts of the manuscript. Obviously, confirmatory research will be talking about hypotheses in the intro. Exploratory research will be talking about hypotheses in the discussion. Both types of papers need to be declared upon submission, and declaring them is actually important because they have different statistical thresholds when it comes to minimization of type 1 and type 2 error. So that leads us to the next suggestion, which is to try to give equal value in the animal behavior literature to both confirmatory and exploratory manuscripts. And the final suggestion has to do with a type of publication that has gained a lot of popularity recently, which is called a pre-register report, which was designed specifically to try to reduce publication bias. So the idea of a pre-register report is that the researchers develop an idea, they describe the study design with a great level of detail, and then they submit that for peer review to a journal. So then the reviewers are going to make suggestions that might certainly include the modification of the study design in order to address a particular hypothesis. And then eventually, if that study is accepted, then the journal guarantees that the final results will be published irrespective of whether they're significant or not. So after collecting and analyzing the data, then the authors can submit that report for a second stage of a lighter peer review and eventually publish the paper. The advantage of pre-registered report is that they minimize the incentives to bias the reporting of certain results, the significant ones, and also it also minimizes the incentives of editors or reviewers of making editorial decisions based on certain results, the significant results. So maybe to summarize, we can think of two operational principles to shift the culture in animal behavior research to more reproducibility. And the first one is to maybe consider a manuscript publishable as one that reports all the necessary information, meaning data, the code for the statistical analysis, the p-values, the effect sizes, and so forth, for a potential future meta-analysis. And the second operational principle is to maybe try to focus more on beautiful methods rather than beautiful results. The idea is that in the future we can have a diverse portfolio of different animal behavior papers that include the conventional confirmatory papers, exploratory papers, pre-registered reports, and also replications of studies that had been published in a particular journal in the past. Thank you very much.